Today we're going to be working on the gridded portrait. For most of you, you've developed already a trace transfer of your photocopy. You've added a gridded or divided composition over the top. It could be waving lines, as in this one right here. It could be the spider web, or in some other cases, the gridded component over the top using a ruler. We're going to be putting in paint to imply near and far using bright and dull, and also implying the value of your original photograph with darker colors in the shadowed areas and lighter colors in the highlighted areas. Now that you have your layout complete, you're going to be working on creating warm and cool colors that come forward and back within your composition. Also paying attention to the light and dark of your composition. I'm going to start with the reference of my black and white photograph, because that will help me think about the value of each color. As we work on our colors, I want you to think about the warm and cool qualities of your composition, what's forward. In my case, I'm thinking about how my nose comes forward, how my brow comes forward, how my upper lip comes forward, and how my chin comes forward, because I have a frontal view of my face. If you are tilted to the side, you might be looking at the line that follows your cheekbone, your jaw, your neck, and what would be cooler would be the far side of your face, the far side of your nose. So first, take your pose, whatever you have, and figure out what those warm elements are going to be, and then determine whether they are light or dark. In my case, I have a very light place on the center of my face, right here. And so I'm going to start with a white mixed with a very warm color, cadmium red, because I want my value to be pale, but I want my color to be very warm. And I'm mixing it with some of the cadmium yellow, because I know that those are both very bright, very intense colors, but it's still pale. And I'm going to fill in one of my squares. Now you notice that I didn't fill in that whole shape because it has a grid through it. So I want it to be divided to follow both the grid and the cells that I originally drew down. So the important thing for me to think about with this is there a line? And if there is, how do I change up that color? Because I want every time that I come to a line that I change the color to a certain extent. So I'm going to make a slightly redder color. And while I'm at it, a slightly yellower color. And while I'm at it, a different shade of yellow. So I've filled in that tip of the nose. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to look around my composition and figure out what else is very forward and very light. So in that case, I'm looking and seeing, well, there's this part right over here, and this part right over here, and there's a little piece down here. And the reason I'm having you move all over the composition is if you simply make one color at a time, you will be here until Christmas. It's really important that you work across the board of your whole composition and not think, oh, I'm just dealing with this one little square. No, 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 no. You want to think about how those warm colors appear in a variety of locations and how you can spread them across the space based on their depth of field. So while I've got this orange on my brush, I'm going to move around and I'm going to put a little bit up here. And I'm going to put a little bit down here. And again, if it crosses a line, it's got to stop and become a new shade. I'm going to grab a different brush and a different color and a little oil. And I'm going to continue on with that idea and put some yellow and a little bit of yellow down here and a little yellow here. And while I'm at it, I'm going to have a little bit of yellow there. While I'm looking here, I'm trying to find the places that I think are very light in value and I'm going to try to add them with very warm colors. If they're in the forward part of my face, I might add a little bit of white just to keep that value pale. And I'm going to come down here. I would also encourage you not to overthink this. You know, sometimes people can get caught up in trying to make everything perfect, and I would really encourage you instead to think about, you know, what do I want to come out in my final product? A little bit of white will help push the cheeks back just slightly from the tip of the nose. So while I have a little bit of white on the brush, I'm going to try to make my squares go a little bit deeper. And I'm going to add one here. Also keep in mind that if you get a square and it's not quite doing what you want it to do, you can always go back and readjust that as you go. Just think, oh, I'll come back and fix that later. Don't stress on it too terribly much. And I'm going to come down here, and it looks like there's a little bit of a light on the lip. And up here, it looks like we had some light on this square up here. Now I'm thinking about that secondary layer, a little further in, not as close to the tip of my nose, but one layer back into the composition. All right, you can see I'm bouncing around the space a little bit. I'm looking for any place where I think would make a line or a mark that would convey that idea of being in that middle space. And I'm going to put a little bit right there. And while I'm at it, I'm going to put a little bit right over there. So I've moved around some of this peach color. It seems to me like I could use a little bit more right in here and a little bit more maybe in this shape right there. I'm not going to get rid of that color. I might just modify it. So I'm going to add some yellow to it, making it into a new shade. And now I'm going to move around to a lot of different parts of the composition to think about other places that need this other shade, still in that light value, still thinking about forward in the composition. Now you can see a few places where your pencil line is going to show through. Ideally, if you've given this a coating of glue, that will keep the pencil from melting up, but also remember to put paint on opaquely enough so that it covers some of those pencil lines. I'm still thinking in that very warm center of the face kind of way. I also want to catch the hand down here in a couple of locations, knowing that I want the hand and the face to look as though they carry the same depth of field, that hand comes forward. Now, how neatly or how loosely you paint these are entirely up to you. There's not extra credit for being extra precise. Some people are just more precise folks, and they enjoy a final product that has that kind of clarity. Honestly, I'm pretty okay whichever way you decide to go about it. Now, the next thing I'm going to think about would be some of the dark elements that are also warm. And the main thing to remember with dark elements that are also warm is that they're probably not going to have much white in them. I'm going to switch over to some of those dark shades and try to add a few of those in so I have a point of reference for the final product. I'm going to go up and add the pupils in the eyes. And the reason I do that at the very beginning is that it helps me key off other things so that they will match the value present in those pupils. So I've got part of one there, part of one there. The other thing I'm noticing is that the inside edges of my mouth are also very dark. So I'm going to put in a couple of bits here and there to help tip that in slightly. And while I'm at it and I have brown on my brush, I'm going to come down to the apron portion and put a square in for the apron. Again, while you have a color on your brush, go ahead and bounce it around the space a little bit. I'm also thinking that I probably need a dark and warm color here in the center. I'm going to choose my darkest red, which is one of my darker, warmer colors, and put that right down the center of my nose, because I know that that is a near element. Now I mix that brown with a little bit of red, and that helps push it towards the foreground a little bit. And I'm also going to put a second one directly below it, but not touching, because remember our rules about not having colors be the same square to square. I'm also going to move over to a color that combines our purple with the red, which I believe will help bring that element forward. One of the things I want to think about as I'm putting my colors down is what's the synergy between the two shades? Are they different enough to show a colored shift while still maintaining the idea of dark value? I actually like that purple. I'm going to try and find a few other spots to use it in. It's kind of good over here. Now, many students have asked me about whether or not we want to use local color, or the color the thing actually is, on these paintings. It is entirely up to you how naturalistic your color palette is. But if you want it to appear like local color, I want you to think about possibly mixing in a little bit of a mother color, a single shade that kind of neutralizes everything. If you want it to be in this neon kind of palette, that part is fine as well. I'm going to move a little dark over here. And I'm going to put a little dark up there. And, oh, by the way, when you go to paint in your squares, make sure you paint them in so they actually fill the square and go all the way to that pencil line. Sometimes people get frightened of the pencil line and they stop, and that pencil line starts to show through in their final product. And even though sunshine fades, throw some into the corners of my mouth. When I make these colors, I'm coming over here and I'm looking to see where else I could use it that would follow the composition and our rule about changing up. So I'm going to switch to a larger brush down here where the shapes are much simpler. It'll speed up your final product, and it will allow you to put in a square in a single shot, which is kind of important. So a square, a square. Speed is of the essence, because you're going to want to spend your time on the little teeny parts of your composition that have little teeny shapes up there. So I'm going to throw on some squares down here. Next, I'm going to move over to this blue, throw a little oil on it. And again, you can see that I am sort of bouncing around in my composition. I'm trying not to be all in one spot. It's really important. If you're trying to think about your colors, you might get yourself a mirror and look at some of the colors that are present in your face to sort of help cue what you might want to use. Now I'm going to split that ultramarine blue with the purple and have something that's sort of halfway between. These might look very similar in our video, but I promise they have a different feeling in real life. And I'm going to add some brown to to that blue. That'll give me something closer to a black. And since this area down here is very black in the final form, I'm going to put some of that invented black. That's darkest brown, darkest blue together. So you can see through the miracle of speeded up video, you've gotten a chance to see me put in all the different kinds of colors. Each of the time I put in a square, I tried to think about how the square functioned in terms of near and far. Was it warm, as in the center section of the picture, or cool, as in the further elements of the picture? I also tried to think about dark and light, with the strong shadow on my nose and across my upper part of my face, inside of my mouth, and down here around my neck. I also tried to pay attention to things like whether the colors themselves have a synergy next to each other, so green to purple and different shades of orange. I tried to create sparkle within the picture by having the shades change square to square. As you can see, I put this together pretty loosely, mostly for the reasons of our video today, but you're welcome to come back and paint this as precisely as you think you would want to, or adding secondary layers over the top. But hopefully this gives you an idea of how you might approach painting one of these gridded portraits.